on the News Channel 5 network. This is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris with you on a Wednesday, and we've got an important show today, and I'm going to invite you to listen in and then join in the conversation as we continue at this point to look one day later now after the horrible school shooting up in Kentucky. And we're going to get to the very latest on all of that. And then we're going to talk about the psychological impact on both sides of this. If you've been following the story up till this point, we now know the names of the two deceased students who were shot and killed there. All right. We also know that they've arrested the shooting suspect, a fellow 15-year-old student, but his name has not yet been released. A lot of questions still out there. We hope investigators in the FBI will hold a news conference later today to try to shed a little more light on it, but they're going to take their time and do this right. The question now today, one, is the victims, making sure that the remaining victims and the ones at Vanderbilt continue to recover, and those who are psychologically, very upset about this get the help they need. We'll touch on that. And then all kinds of theories are being thrown around on social media right now about this young shooter and whether or not he was a bullying victim, or could there have been warning signs that could tip anyone that he might have been planning something along these lines. We'll get to that as well, all right, with our guest. But before we get to all of that, what we're going to do, I think we'll probably start first with a package last night that Matthew Torres put together to give you a little bit of an overview. And then as I plug in my IFB here, which is allowing me to hear our crew out in the field, we're also going to do a phoner with Dan Kennedy, who's been there all morning. Let me just check. Mary Elena, would you like us to do Dan first? Let's go to Dan Kennedy right now, who's been there all morning. And Dan, good morning. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine.
Hey, Nick. Happy to be here, especially for an important story like this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know you've been up there all morning, and, what have you observed so far? I guess at the location, are you still there at the school?
We just started driving down into town.
Okay.
Benton is a small town, 4,300 people. The high school kind of sits off of a two-lane highway, so we're pretty isolated outside the high school, and I just wanted to see how the rest of the town is getting about their day. So we're just cruising through Benton right now, and I, in fact, just passed a place, the Ponderosa Steakhouse, and they have a massive American flag that's flying at half staff this morning. Other than that, folks are driving, they're going on their way, but school not in session this morning. As you can imagine, Nick, still a crime scene there.
Have they said, I guess, a couple of things? I know the FBI is there now, and then are they having grief counselors come in, and is there a location where students or families can go today? And is that, it's not at the school, obviously. Any idea on how that's all set up?
Yeah, so they're going to have a massive counseling center open today. It's at the old Pepsi bottling plant here in Benton. They're opening that up at 9 o'clock this morning. It's going to be available to students, parents, teachers, whoever, until 3 o'clock today. So you can imagine a lot of people could be using those services because, Nick, there were hundreds of students inside that school when one of their fellow peers opened fire.
Okay. The other side of this is the FBI, and I saw as we were reporting with you this morning that the FBI is asking anyone with information to come forward, maybe those who were there that haven't spoken to law enforcement, or maybe someone on the periphery who knew the shooter. They're asking for people to come forward, right?
They want to talk to anybody who has spoken with this 15-year-old suspected shooter, really, especially in the last few days, but at any point in his life that might try to explain his actions yesterday. So, Nick, the FBI, very good at what they do, as you know. They're going to leave no stone left unturned. They're going to be working in conjunction with Kentucky State Police, ATF, you name it. Any agency that can possibly help out will be helping. But you're right, the FBI in Louisville is asking for people to come forward who might be able to help them in this investigation.
Okay, and as you've said, we hope that there's a news conference later today to fill in some gaps, but they're going to take their time. Meanwhile, I know you're like me, Dan, so have you spent some time on topics or social media? Because first of all, the name of the suspect has not been confirmed by law enforcement, but it's out there. And at least someone that people believe is the suspect. And there's all types of theories going out there around about bullying, about whether or not his father had recently passed away, about whether or not his own mother showed up at the school looking to see if he had been injured and then was horrified to learn that he was the shooter. Those are all unconfirmed reports, but things are going rampant on social media. I'll just be curious if today you run into anyone that can shed some light on who this individual is.
Well, Well, we'll certainly be asking those questions, and that's what a lot of speculation is at this point,
Right.
Nick, is what drove this 15-year-old to do this. Unlike a lot of other school shootings that we've reported on in the past, though, this suspect is still alive. He did not take his own life. He was not taken down by law enforcement through lethal measures. So he will, if he chooses, be able to try to explain his actions to law enforcement.
Right. I mean, my understanding, Dan, I don't know if anyone's told you this, but I mean, we know that he had a handgun. My understanding is he basically emptied it, and when it was done, he put it to the ground and surrendered.
And I had not heard that yet, Nick, but I was curious as to how that went down, because it took 7 minutes from the first 911 call to go out to the time deputies arrived at school. And the first deputy inside that school building took down the suspect, apprehended him apparently in a nonviolent means. So
Right.
It sounds to me as if the 15-year-old didn't put up a fight. Putting the gun down on the ground after emptying it, that's the first I've heard. But certainly that's one thing we hope to get confirmed today.
Gotcha. Well, listen, Dan, I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. All of this right now, as I say, on social media, they're out there. There's names being bandied about and the like, but you just don't know until we get official confirmation from law enforcement on that. And the truth is, Dan, we may never fully understand what the motive is, but motive really doesn't matter here. I have already seen some of the debate starting. I'm going to talk about this with our guest after you leave us. If he was bullying, all right, that's awful. But that's no excuse for what happened here. None. And it sure as heck isn't a defense.
That's right. And as we speculate about motives and about what possibly could have driven this 15-year-old to do this, Nick, I know you will agree with me. What's most important is that, remember, especially the two victims who lost their
That's
lives,
right.
and that's Bailey Nicole Holt and Preston Ryan Cope.
Yeah, you're right. It's about the victims right now, certainly, and making sure those who are still alive get the help they need. Dan, thank you so much. I know we'll follow you continually today, and you'll be probably back down there tomorrow. But great job this morning, and thanks for joining us.
Sure thing. Talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks. All right, that's Dan Kennedy, who was live there all morning in the morning show. Do we want to take a couple of packages or just do one of the packages before we move on? We'll just go ahead with Matthew's package, and maybe that's the only one we'll need to run. If it gives, some of the nuts and bolts of how this all went down, we can take a break, and then we'll come back with our guest, who is a psychologist, to comment on a lot of this. Let's have a look at the story that kind of gives you a background of what happened.
First thing we did was a big hug and just...
For Alicia Hobbs,
hug them tight tonight.
a hug was the only way to feel a sense of peace after a real-life nightmare rocked her normally quiet community.
Just being dumbfounded that something so close to home.
Before 8 Monday morning, Kentucky State Police say a 15-year-old student walked into Marshall County High School with a handgun and opened fire on the students. It was mass chaos as teenagers scrambled for safety. Hobbs' 16-year-old nephew was there.
He heard the noises. He said at first it was just a loud noise. He thought it sounded like a book dropping, and then it proceeded the second, third, and he realized quickly what was going on.
Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin says 19 students were injured. All but 5 suffered gunshot wounds. However, 2 15-year-old students did not make it. Hobbs knows it could have been worse for her nephew. His cousin was shot and flown to Vanderbilt.
He instantly ran and hid. He actually went to the locker room, and then from the locker room he made it, and once the shot stopped, he made a run for the Board of Education office, actually on the school grounds.
Many questions still puzzled this longtime resident. For now, even a simple hug can be the right step to healing. In some way, the shooting has affected everyone.
The fear that this can happen on any given day. These are our kids, it's our babies, and like I said, it's a small community. So everybody knows somebody, so it touches all of us close to home.
Okay, yeah, a small community on that front. Should we go now to a break, or do we have to? Yeah, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Dr. Anna Settle. She's a licensed psychologist, and they play a big role in the aftermath of these types of things, both in understanding maybe how or why something like this happens, as well as, providing the grief counseling and the like. So we'll talk with her. We'll open up the phone lines and get your take and reaction to this horrible situation there. That still lots of unanswered questions, and we hope to learn more today. We'll be back with more on MorningLine right after this.